Welcome, everyone. I just want to start off with a territory acknowledgement. I'm grateful that I'm joining you today from the unceded territory of the Coast Salish people, including the territories of the Squamish and the Tsleil-Waututh Nation. I think most of you know me. My name's Tegan Smith, and I qualified as a planner back in 1998 and spent most of my career working in government. At the end, the last position that I was working in an organization with was in the development team as a director at Hungerford Properties with Simon, who's joined us here today. So I started my company Channel about 2.5 years ago in January 2020, and the business has grown tremendously over the last 2.5 years. There's 3 parts to the business. There's our land use opinions, and so we do those within 30 days for any acquisition, disposition, or any change in a business plan. And we do those for all kinds of transactions: residential, rental housing, social housing. We do them for actually nonprofits, different cultural organizations, private developers, industrial, office. So we're doing those for a wide range of clients, ranging from private developers, REITs, family offices, nonprofit organizations, and we've also done them for government organizations for their own capital projects, which is really interesting. So those are the 3 aspects of the business. So we have the land use opinions, the government relations, and then also development management, where we partner with an execution partner. And so the reason why we're having this session today is really, I have this really strong vision around leaders helping leaders, and around all of you as leaders in the industry in the Vancouver region, really connecting with decision makers to make an impact. So I want to just really thank you for joining in the session today. I have been talking with some council candidates recently, and I also had coffee last week with Mayor Cote, who's not running again, but he's the mayor of New Westminster. He's the chair of the Regional Planning Committee and the Mayor's Council, and I did have the opportunity to pick his brain about this workshop and get some of his feedback. So you'll see some of those threads kind of weaving through as we talk today. So thank you again for coming. Many of you have worked with me, and I'm a little bit fierce when it comes to time management. So I really do value your time, and I really do want to wrap up before 1 o'clock. I really do want to give you a few minutes back. And so the hour is going to go quickly. As you all know, every land development project is different. So we are not going to get into your specific case studies today, but my goal is to empower you, that you leave with the tools and some new skills and information and a specific workbook that you can fill out, in order that you're confident, you're jazzed, and you're feeling brilliant about how you're going to approach this work. So just as I get started here, does everybody have a copy of the workbook that I sent around by email? Yeah? Okay, great, perfect. Okay, so what I'm planning to do with this session is really run it in 2 parts. So the first part is we're going to go through the workbook, and we're going to go through the key messages discussion. I'll open it up for questions. And then we'll get into the council engagement plan discussion. Here's Lillian. So we'll start off with going through the key messages section of the workbook, questions. Then we'll talk about the council engagement plan section, and then questions, and then we'll wrap up. So that's the game plan for today. Before I go ahead and put the workbook on the screen, which is what I'm planning on doing, is really going through it and really coaching you through the tool. I wanted to offer some commentary. And I really have a strong value around leadership as helping. And so the most important thing that you could take away from today is that as you prepare to have conversations with municipal council candidates counselors, or even senior staff, it's really important to be elevating, helping to elevate, helping to inform, helping to raise the field in terms of the quality of information that you're working with. And so the integrity in that is something that's really important to me. And so as we start to talk about your key messages and your council engagement plan, my key thing that I would love, everyone to take away is not to push, and really to helping candidates to find success. So most candidates, when they put their names forward for municipal council, they do it with a specific issue in mind. So they're thinking about how their main street is dying. They soon learn that it's a lack of workforce. They soon learn the lack of workforce is related to housing. But when they initially run for council, they typically have a very community specific issue and maybe not a super deep understanding of the complexity around it. And so it's really important as folks start to put their campaigns together that they get as much information as they can from people who are actually out there in the field on the ground. And so our role as leaders is really to mind the gap, to help create that space and connect the information that you have with the information that they need. And so really offering support and clarity. So creating messages that are very, very clear, very direct, and help connect the dots, and elevate the council candidate, which is going to elevate your team, and it's also going to elevate the other stakeholders. So we're going to go through this workbook pretty quickly, but my headline advice is the importance of really taking the time to reflect around the alignment between what you're trying to do and ultimately what the long-term vision is for the city. Taking the time to reflect and be positive. And so as I think all of you know, municipalities, there is a hierarchy in municipalities. You have your staff hierarchy, and then you have the council members. And there are hundreds of projects going on in municipalities at any given time. And council members are not aware of them, and they simply cannot keep track of them. And so whatever you're doing, it's going to be really important to focus on principles that can be applied not only to your project, but more broadly in their campaign and within the municipality. And also focusing on the relationship that you're building as a resource. Okay, so connecting the individual with the alignment in your values and some key principles, and then opening up a relationship that will, if elected, you'll have that relationship, and it's that momentum around that long-term relationship where you become a resource for insight, for information. And so that approach is something that's really important. I just wanted to make one more comment before we actually get into the workbook, and that is around the alignment in the vision. And so sometimes people are like, what do you mean by that specifically? Okay, so I wanted to just give you a few specific examples. Okay, so sometimes, and I want to say 80% of applicants, when they present their project, they do so from a business perspective. This is what we need to make our numbers work. This is what we need to make our business plan work. Whereas they don't actually care about that. You care about that. That's step one, is to figure out what you need. But then step two is to really figure out where the public benefit is. Okay, and really clearly articulating that and defining that. And so for an industrial project, the value add in protecting the environment, protecting green spaces, enhancing habitat, that's a huge public benefit. The reality of creating, we have a shortage of industrial space, more space for small business. The reality of the GHGs, right now stuff's getting sent to Calgary and then trucked back. It's a huge greenhouse gas impact. So those are some of the public benefits that go along with an industrial development as an example. But it's really important to look at a couple of resources. One resource is the OCP, the community plan. That's a wonderful resource. But you also need to talk to municipal staff to understand, is this council all rowing behind the OCP? Because you could be quoting the OCP when they're thinking of tearing up the OCP. So you really do need to understand specifically. And then around key messages and helping to craft those key messages, there's some amazing resources out there. Colliers does really great work, market assessment, Cushman Wakefield, Rennie around residential. There's all this data that's out there that you can grab that helps to create specific metrics about why these principles are important. Okay, so in a multifamily project, I'm working on a 148 townhome project where it's reducing pressure on the lower end of the market. If those 148 three-bedroom townhomes happen, that's going to create options for those middle-income families to move out of other places and create more opportunities for others. In terms of social housing projects, I think those are the clearest in terms of the public benefit around providing housing for the most vulnerable members of our community. In terms of office, with office development, we get public space, we get jobs around transit. Okay, so for each of these, nonprofit capital, I've been working on some arts projects and a museum project. Obviously, the public benefit is inherent in the project itself, and the sooner it happens, the sooner that amenity is available for communities. So all that to say that as we go ahead and open the workbook, I really wanted to start off by setting the stage and really explaining the importance around taking the time to really think about this and really think it through, because it's really important. We have a really important opportunity to help inform the conversations that are happening. So here's the workbook. And so if you'd like, you're welcome to just follow along. If you have two screens and you want to open it on your screen, great. But we're going to move through it fairly quickly. So this is the workbook. And we've talked about most of this. So essentially, I'm going to spend a few minutes now just talking about your key messages. So at the end of the day, what you deliver and when you deliver it is going to be part of your candidate engagement plan. But at a high level, what I envision for my clients is a 1 to 2 page document that can be summed up in 3 to 5 bullets. Okay. And when you put this together, when I put these together, I'm looking for help from many minds. Okay. So from the project team, the subject matter experts on the team, I look to my graphic artist, Jenny, who made this beautiful workbook, to make it look gorgeous. And I'm looking for myself as a planning consultant to finalize those key messages. And I also have someone on my team, Mary Wellman, she's based in Salt Spring, who does strategic communications. So she reviews all and writes all my key messages together with me, just because she's retired now and she's got so much experience. So again, starting with this future vision of the city. So what is your future vision of the city? Okay, and it's really important to really visualize that. How does this project align with your long-term vision of the city? Okay, and what inspired you or your company to have this vision? Okay, so some of you are from larger companies that have a very structured kind of vision for what they're doing. Write that down. If not, it could be more your individual vision. And then how does your project meaningfully contribute to making the city a better place? So really knowing that, and that's where you're going to be linking back to the OCP conversations you've had with municipal staff to make sure that you're connecting the dots. And again, about your values. You know, is your company committed to meeting and exceeding all environmental regulations? Are you committed? You know, what commitments are you making around housing affordability? How's this been demonstrated through other projects? So really having a clear story about who you are and how to start to build a foundation for that long-term relationship. Okay, and then from there, describing your project. I'm just going to run through this part really quickly. Your company name, address, and website basics, right? This is just all the property information. You know, if you have a site map, if you have a rendering, a short description of your business plan, the address, how big is the property, all these basic things, so important. This is just a cheat sheet so that you remember all this stuff. Is it on a bike route, transit route? What's the nearest OCP? Is there a school nearby, a park? If there's a water course, this is where projects get interesting, as Simon could tell you. So this is, you know, anything that involves a water course will need to go to FLNRO and Fisheries and Oceans Canada, and that can trigger Indigenous engagement as well. So this is one that's just really important for you to always know on any project anyway. But secondly, you're going to need to understand how you're describing that, because most council candidates will have no idea about senior government approvals and how they're related to the municipal approvals. So I wouldn't get into it as part of your engagement, but I would just be mindful of it in being authentic in the story that you're telling about the approval process. Like no BSing that somehow this magic's going to happen over here with these senior governments. It's important that everyone is aware of it. And then if it's within 800 meters of a controlled access freeway, then it's going to have to go through Ministry of Transport as well. Okay, and sometimes depending on how things go with this project, there's a land assembly option, there's a phase 2. So it may be that that's something you want to talk about as well. Okay, and then I can't underscore enough that most folks who are running for municipal council have no idea about what the land use approvals process is. They don't learn it until they're on the job. So, you know, we're going to take every opportunity we have to explain it, but it's maybe not going to be in your 1 to 2 pager or your 3 to 5 bullets. But you are going to need to say in words that you're pursuing a rezoning, or you have zoning and you're pursuing a development permit, or you've had, you know, an issue, you know, could be related to the building permit, related to green building policy or something of that nature. Especially with affordable housing projects, those types of cost factors are things that can come up in conversations. Okay, so any specific things that are specific to your site, most people who are running for council for the first time, they'll have no idea what's going on with housing policy. Okay, and these councils that are in right now have been doing a lot of work on housing policy, and a lot of those housing policies still have kinks that have to get worked out. So this is something that you would want to talk about. The City of Vancouver is looking at some of their view cones, reviewing them, which is awesome. Something you might want to mention about if there's an opinion or a view about what that work looks like. Community amenity contributions. In most municipalities, they're still being negotiated based on land lift. City of Vancouver, some corridors in some area, like Canby corridor in some areas of the city, they have a rate. So all of that to say that every project is different, and you're going to need to understand specifically what are the issues that you feel need to get addressed. And then, as I mentioned, the senior government decisions, precedent projects that you'd like to highlight. There may be something that went well 5 years ago, and that is not possible today because of some changes in policy. Yeah, so basically from there, the next step is to put that feedback together. So what's working well? Give some credit. There's a lot of good. There's a lot of good. Okay. These people who put their names forward for municipal council, they're not doing this to get rich. They're doing it for their community, for the benefit of their community. So what has gone well? What's the good work that's been done by previous councils? There is good. Find the good. Acknowledge it. But also, we all know there's so many challenges. There's so many challenges, and that they're standing right in the way of delivering housing at all parts of the spectrum. So, and delivering industrial land and delivering office projects and so on. But what is it that's challenging for your project specifically? And you could probably pick 10 things, but you know what? It's probably better to just pick one or maybe two things. And then very specific suggestion on the change that you'd like to see. And it could be that there's information that you got blindsided by, like, holy cow, we had already been through zoning and we were in the comments with our DP and all of a sudden we found out. So we would have liked to have known that earlier. That's also helpful for people to know. Okay, and then some recommendations on how the process could be streamlined, perhaps. That's my bias because I think it can be streamlined. And then industry groups and peer organizations. So do not underestimate how much help is available to you. So for affordable housing projects, BC Nonprofit Housing Association, UDI for residential projects, NAOP for office and industrial, ULI have a number of resources, Haven, the Home Builders Association, Neighbors. So there's a lot that you could piggyback on, and also feedback that you can hear on what you're putting together to make sure, you're going to write, you're going to say and do whatever you want. But if you could leverage some other really good brain power and thinking that other groups are doing, go for it. And UDI they're active in, each sub-region. And so a lot of information is available on their website as well. Now, one of the things, okay, let's keep going. But one of the things I wanted to mention that's really important is staff engagement. The staff at the municipal level are your most important stakeholder and ally. And so check in with them about your messages. Like, once you've gotten some feedback and you're feeling like, this is what I think I need to say, talk to your planner and see, because you want to make sure there's integrity in those messages and that they're comfortable with what you're saying. You don't have to take all their feedback, but hear their feedback. And if you agree to disagree, that's okay too, but at least there's integrity in what you're doing. If you go behind their back, they will not be taking your phone calls. They will put your file at the side of the desk. It'll be the last one. And it's just going to cause delays. So make sure that you talk to the municipal staff and get their feedback on your call to action. Get their feedback to make sure it's constructive. Be partners with them in identifying that specific action that you'd like to see that would improve our city for future generations. And this is where taking the time to reflect comes in, because some planners are hard to work with. Some people are hard to work with. And so you're going to have to just really figure out where that common ground is and how to articulate if you don't have a common view. But the most important thing is that you're not catching anybody by surprise about what your opinion is or throwing anybody under the bus. So so now thinking ahead, so you're helping candidates to prepare their campaigns. Okay, that's what, at the end of the day, you're helping them to be well informed. And so in a nutshell, what's going well with land use policy? What are some things you can say, like, kudos for this, kudos for that, kudos for advancing the Vancouver plan, kudos for approving, hopefully today, or starting today, the Broadway plan. Kudos for the work you did on the CACs, on the Campy corridor, whatever it is. And then what's not going well? What's not going well? What is that issue? Okay, so for me, I'll use the 148 townhome example. the property has zoning, but it doesn't have a development permit. And the municipality is just focusing on zonings right now for their municipal planning staff because they don't have enough staff, because the staff of the Great Resignation is affecting the public service more than anyone. And so my view is that they need to be engaging a professional reliance model. So they're allowing recommendations to come from planning consultants, environmental consultants, engineering firms, rather than doing all that work in-house, because it's not working. The system's broken. And in smaller municipalities, that's what they do, and it works just fine. And then what specific action do you recommend that will result in a specific desired future city? And then who's the contact? Okay, now this is something not to take lightly. Who is the contact person for elected folks? That's going to need intentional consideration. It could be a senior person in your organization if they can actually be contacted, if they're easy to contact, if they you really want to make sure the person's going to call them back, and you want to make sure that that person is not going to bite their head off or damage the relationship, because this is about a relationship. Okay, so really making sure that you're intentional in selecting who's the contact information. And in some municipalities, there's someone on your team that has a long-term relationship. They may not be the VP, they may not be the CEO, but they still might be the right person. Okay. What questions do you have about the key messages? Any questions? No?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get my video started up again. Okay. So, you talk about candidates and getting to know them. There can be a ton of candidates running for elected office. So it would be, quite a feat to get in touch with all of them and say, hey, this may help you. So, I guess my question is, where do you show allegiance? Because it is a competition. They're facing off against each other. Because you're indicating that we should do this work prior to the election, and so that we have a project ready to go, or we have a project in the works, and it's it needs some input from council. What would you recommend would be the process to engage with all the candidates?
Well, that's almost a layup to the next part of the session. So thank you. No, that's great. That's great. So absolutely. So each of you are from completely different types of organizations, okay? And you have, some of you are more focused in just one or two municipalities. Some are in many different municipalities. Some have many projects. Some have just a couple of projects. And so the first decision is going to be around whether it's an engagement about your company, and it's a more broad engagement around your values, your principles, your future vision of the city, and how it applies to your projects. I know some of you, like, for example, Simon at Hungerford, they're in all different asset classes in all different municipalities. And so that would be one where they would want to probably just pick one or two projects, rather, otherwise they'd be spread way too thin. But for, let's say, for example, a social housing provider that's maybe in Vancouver and Burnaby and has recently been through the approvals process, let's say in Vancouver, and worked through some of the kinks and problems with the development permitting process for a social housing project with, requirements at added cost and with very little value. That would be an example of one where it would be a lot more kind of concise. And then in terms of what that candidate engagement plan looks like, it could be something more along the lines of a 1 to 2 pager that goes out to the different campaign managers at the different parties and any individual candidates. So the size and scale of this is going to vary based on your organization, your type of project, actually where you are in the process as well, based on how much you've learned, whether you're just in the middle of an absolute frustration or whether you've been through it all and you have something to offer that's going to help others. Yeah. Any other questions?
Just a quick follow-up. Yeah, we've got some really innovative ideas around, creating, affordable housing opportunities and inclusive of, reduced parking and having more bikes, creating bike routes, creating kind of a real vibrant community in a housing development that can transfer largely to the community. So really innovative kind of ideas. And so that was more around, kind of galvanizing, yes, the candidates around a real interesting cause.
Mm-hmm. Totally, around some of those community benefits, public benefits. Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to carry on unless anyone has a burning question. Should we carry on? Yeah, okay, great. So I'm going to go back to the workbook here. Here we go. Okay, so thanks to Wes for getting us ready to jump right into the candidate engagement plan. So I've said this before, but I feel that I spend most of my time really coaching people about how to build trust and how to manage that space in between the project and the government organization. So building trust, as we all know, requires integrity and consistency over time. Okay, so you're going to need to plan, honestly, the more you can communicate your message, that's going to build a relationship. The more that you're willing to listen and hear feedback on your message and adapt that message, the more effective you'll be. So your key messages, they're going to be iterative. If you're really listening, you're going to be adapting them over time. You're going to be adapting them based on staff feedback, but also based on the engagement that you do. So before you start to build your plan, my recommendation is just to go onto the Elections BC website and just make sure you're really confident in the timelines and the steps and the rules. And as I mentioned in answering Wes's question, really deciding if you're developing a distinct plan for every municipality where you have a project. For some of you, that could be a heck of a job, okay? Or if you're just going to hone in on, if you're going to be really intentional and where you think there's the most impact and the most need for your offering. And then what are your specific goals for engaging council candidates and stakeholders? Like, why are you even going to do it? Because if you're going to do it, you want it to have an impact. It's going to take a lot of your time and a lot of your thought and intention. The benefit of it cannot be underestimated. Building relationship is going to help with future projects. The amount of time you're going to save on future projects is immeasurable. Okay, so then mapping out your key dates. So the first thing, look at Elections BC, talk to the local election officer. So you can find that person through the clerk's office at the municipality and start to map out the key dates. Okay, so who on your team is going to be responsible? Because this is a job, right? There's tasks, there's all the tasks that need to be managed, and then there's the actual engagement. It doesn't have to be the same person. Some of you are from big companies, some of you are from small companies. And so you may put a team on this, which would be awesome, but it may be, if it's you, you're going to need to get organized, right? So what needs to be done before the summer? So if you ask me, this workbook needs to be done before the summer, which is why I'm running the workshop in May. What needs to be done during the summer? So what communication, what research needs to happen, reaching out to UDI, NAOP, BC Nonprofit Housing Association, others. What needs to happen after Labor Day? So after Labor Day is when all of the candidates will have gone through their nomination and the campaigning will start. So between Labor Day and October 15th, that's where it gets, where they're out there, they're in debates. Very hard to reach them, but what are you doing to support? Okay, so that's going to need some real thought. So again, who is making the candidate engagement plan? Who's tracking it? Who's tracking it? Because if it's a senior executive who's doing the meetings, they may not have time to track it. So you may need to chase up with them. How did your meeting go with so-and-so? What is the next step? What do we need to give them any other information? Should we be updating our key messages? It's really important knowing kind of your role there. And then how are you going to communicate with candidates? Emails are great. Sometimes they end up in a junk pile. Phone calls are awesome. Meetings are even better. But again, depending on how much bandwidth you have, you're going to need to pick your battles. You might send an email and follow up with a phone call. It's going to vary based on your level of resource and by the candidate and how the campaign unfolds. Your topic may have very little interest to a certain candidate, and you may just not be able to get their attention. Who's looking at the media on a daily basis to see what issues are coming up? Particularly between starting now, but particularly over the summer, there'll be a little bit more. After Labor Day, there's going to be stuff coming up in the news every day. And then again, who's speaking, communicating? Is it the same person talking to everybody? It could be that you have, I don't know, someone on your team who used to be a firefighter. And so they're the right person to deal with the mayor of Burnaby. Whereas, they used to work together. There's all those kinds of things that you need to take into consideration. And then do you plan to offer financial support to any of the candidates or all of the candidates? If so, when will you do this? Okay, you need to be thinking about that. And again, looking at the Elections BC rules. And then who from your team, because fundraising is part of what they do, and they do develop, they do collect money from different organizations. Who from your team are going to go to the all candidate debates? Are you going to invite others, neighbors that have the same beefs? Are you going to contact the debate organizer and recommend a question? And then what's the follow-up that's happening, right, as the campaign unfolds? Now, as I say all of that, you guys might be thinking, holy cannoli, what happens if my project becomes a political hot potato because I'm in there? You need to sort of understand that. Okay, you need to assess that in terms of how much you're putting yourself out there. Because it could be that what you're doing, if you're doing it well, you're informing about some principles and you're really helping. But if, that's where all that reflection is really going to come in terms of how and when you choose to engage. Maybe you're sending an email, or maybe you're just having a meeting and a coffee and almost two-way collecting information from each other to understand what they need, what you have to offer, and managing risk that way around the political, staying out of a political mess, staying off the front page of the Vancouver Sun. Okay, and so then other stakeholders. So for example, in the city of Vancouver, they have campaign teams, right? There's campaign managers. And so, are you reaching out to them? Yeah, in the city of Vancouver, you're reaching out to the campaign team first, unless you already know the council member. It all depends on the relationships that you have and the project that you have. And then are there other stakeholders that you need to be talking with? Neighbors, someone else that has a similar project, all the organizations that I mentioned, the trade organizations, the industry groups. And then how do you socialize the messages to make sure you don't blindside or jeopardize relationships with municipal staff or other key stakeholders? So again, going back, making sure that you have talked to the planner about what you're saying and don't throw anyone under the bus. Okay. we've all had problems with particular staff members. At least a couple of you I know have had problems with a certain environmental professional that used to work at Surrey. And, you know, honestly, I think you need to just be really careful about bringing up issues like that around staff. I think just really give careful consideration to that. And if you want to talk that through with me, by all means, but it's never a good thing to throw someone under the bus. So if it's really like, for example, in that particular case, this one individual was seriously impacting housing supply and industrial land supply and so forth, she became a real roadblock. That needs to be discussed from a process point of view, rather than maybe a person point of view. Okay, and then again, who shares your views? Again, industry groups, etc. Who's organizing all candidate debates? You know, how can you contribute questions, etc. So there's a lot of caveats, and it's a lot to go through in an hour. But what I can say is that this is very complex and requires a lot of thought and intention to do it well. What questions do you guys have for me?
I have one more.
Sure.
Around, you know, we've put in a PAR request. So, you know, and because you mentioned early on as you mentioned early on in the presentation, you know, the turnover in cities is having a massive influence in, you know, timelines and turnaround times. And so, you know, and I know the senior planner well enough to reach out to him in the municipality I'm speaking about. Should I reach out to him? Or, you know, in terms of or just let the wheels of the, you know, process, like you talk about the hierarchy, it goes from one stage to the next. Because I've been in touch with the planners, but not the head planner yet. And they're continuously talking about, well, you know, we can't get to it immediately. It's on his desk, and he will get it back to you by the end of the week, and it still doesn't come. So what would be your recommendation in terms of that PR around that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And Simon and I had dealt with this a lot actually on the exchange project in terms of having a really rigorous protocol in terms of escalating things. So the number one thing is that you don't want to catch anyone by surprise. So if you're going to escalate something, you always need to tell the person below them in the chain of command. So if you feel that there's a process problem that is resulting in your application not being considered, then again, agreeing to disagree, letting them know, you know, it seems like we have a difference of opinion about what the next step is with this application. And what I'm hearing from you is it's actually a process issue that it's been determined from higher up that this project is lower down on the list, or whatever the issue is, right? Sure. I'm using that as an example. And so I'm going to be contacting the manager, or I actually know the director from when we used to be on a committee together a few years ago. I'm planning on giving them a call.
Okay.
The other thing that happens a lot of times when you indicate that you're planning on giving them a call is that they reach out to that person and the issue gets resolved. So even when you place the phone call to your friend who's the director, you get a call back from the planner saying, not to worry, your application is actually really straightforward. As long as you can provide me with this memo or this or that, I think it's going to be fine. So just the act of it can generate some energy to indicate that you're going to elevate it, but nobody likes it when their boss asks them, I got a call from so-and-so. What's happening with that project? And so if you can give a heads up down below, it just, again, it builds that trust. And that trust is what leads to those return phone calls, and those return phone calls, or let's just hop on the phone with the subject matter expert and resolves this, is the best alternative compared to 3 months waiting for comments to be returned because they don't want to phone you. They're going to give you a letter. And I'll tell you, with all of my clients, we're doing it on the phone and we're not doing the letter. We're getting the letter eventually, that's the approval letter. But if you can skip that 3 to 6 month comment period, it's a huge savings to the project. Also, a lot can get worked through with the 2 subject matter experts on the phone, rather than getting the comments back and then you have to answer the questions. And then, you know, it just creates so much delay, and also cost, because they might write in their letter that you need this full-blown 30-page report when actually you just needed to clarify the figure that was on page 6. Right. So it can save a lot of time and money that way.
Great. Well, thank you for that. Much appreciated.
Yeah, you're welcome. Other questions?
Hey, Tegan, Judy here. I'm actually on vacation, so I'm not going to turn my video on because nobody wants to see me in vacation mode. My follow-up, my one question I had is regarding the donation. It's just out of curiosity, you know, sometimes there's, you know, very bad reputation that comes up in the media with developers providing donations to councillors. What's the dynamic, or I guess sweet spot from your experience when it comes to that kind of aspect?
Yeah, so to be honest with you, I haven't been directly involved in the campaign donation strategy, except for a couple of organizations. And the decision was to give a modest contribution to all of the candidates. So like $500 to everybody. What the values behind that decision are, you're raising the field, right? You're raising the field of the debate. You're helping everybody to actually put together a decent campaign so that you get good debate, good exchange. It's kind of a good democratic approach.
That makes sense. Thanks.
But again, some folks are highly political. They have a very strong, like they would never support a conservative candidate, or they would never support a liberal candidate or a Democratic candidate. So, you know, it's gonna depend on the values of the group. Yeah. Anybody else?
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Judy. Great question.
I've got a quick question, Tegan.
Yeah.
In terms of having applications heard by council, relative to the timing of the election, and potentially like a new council coming in, like typically, how soon after the new council have been established would you expect to see them making decisions on applications through the readings? Great
question. Yeah. So after October, the October election, the councils will be having their first meetings in January. So for the most part, it's going to depend on the municipality, on the item, how controversial the item is, how much training the council needs before they consider an item of this nature. But it could be as soon as January. However, in staff's opinion, it could be that, for example, the council needs a full briefing, or they need a few workshops about housing policy before this certain housing application is introduced. The staff members are also monitoring the debate, right? So when these new folks come in, it's in everyone's interest for staff to bring forward applications that can be approved. And so they won't want to bring it forward if they don't feel like the council members are informed to the level that they need to be. Yeah.
I guess it depends on how many of the existing council are still there and to what extent and it's still intact. Okay.
Absolutely. And I mean, in the last council, I mean, Vancouver and Surrey both fully turned over. And I mean, wow, lost so much time in both those municipalities. And then in other municipalities, we had less turnover. In the last municipal election, in most municipalities, there was a massive turnover. Abbotsford is one that there was not much turnover, which worked out quite well for the exchange project, for example. So yeah, again, that's the thing, is monitoring that. And then one of the things that I didn't mention is at the end, after the election, you're going to need to go back and take a look at who got elected and make some meaning of that. Like, what does that mean? What does that mean? And then again, going back to your values, going back to your principles. If you've already built that relationship, it's so much easier then to phone and say, hey, do you want to talk about this again? If you've already been talking about it versus if you're coming out of nowhere. So does that answer your question, Simon?
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. That provides a lot of clarity. Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Okay, so it's 12:55. So yeah, I'd love to just kind of, wrap up and make sure we're done by 1 o'clock. So in a nutshell, the goal of this work is to elevate, to inspire a vision of the future of our city. We have this incredible city, but there's so much work to be done. So it's to contribute, right? To help support, bring thought leadership to decision making, while avoiding being a hot potato in the election. Okay, so it's that tension that really is going to build the integrity in the work that you're doing. And that's why I say reflect, think, don't rush into this work, don't leave it till the last minute. The other piece that I wanted to mention is just, every project is different. Every strategy is going to need to be different depending on the people, depending on the project. And so in the last page of the workbook, you'll see my email address. Feel free to send me an email if you want to talk again about your project. We are supporting some project leaders by actually doing this work on their behalf. We're facilitating the work. So if we can help, by all means, just reach out as well, and we can brainstorm kind of what that might look like, depending on your project. But again, I just want to really thank you so much to all of you for joining me today, and for joining me in this passion about really raising the field in the candidates, and really up-leveling the quality of the discussion and the debate, in order that we do more for our city, for future generations, that we get these land development projects that we need so badly, that they happen. So thank you all so much for joining me today.